Hello everyone, my name is Jochen. To know more about me and what I do, please check the first video. As I said in the other videos as well, I'm not going to repeat that boring stuff in every video of this series. I actually wanted to do an introduction with me for every video that I made. So a video on Kruger would have featured me driving in our SUV. The video on the private reserves would have had me driving in an open vehicle for one of the lodges on the private reserves. But unfortunately, since this is the COVID-19 crisis, we're not allowed to go anywhere. But yeah, this video is a little bit different. So at least this video, you're unfortunate enough to see my face, because in this video we will be discussing all types of regions that are easy to combine with Kruger. And as you can see here behind my back, this is the escarpment that is part of the Drakensberg mountain range. It hosts one of the most scenic routes in the whole of South Africa, which is the Panorama Route. So it was very relevant for me to just sit here at one of our pools at our lodge and to show you this scenery. We'll be discussing that in more detail later on. Enjoy the video. Okay, so this video will probably not be as long as other videos because it would serve no purpose going into too much detail. If someone feels the need to make detailed videos on the regions I'm about to sum up next, I'd say please go ahead. Just let me know and I'll gladly link to your videos. With this video, my only intention is to give you some ideas on which nearby regions are good combinations with Kruger, how easy they are to combine with Kruger, and how best to do that. Now, typically, you want to end your vacation on an absolute high, and nothing beats a safari, nothing beats wildlife encounters as are currently being shown on your screen right now. So, any of the regions I'll be discussing should be on your itinerary before you come to Kruger for your safari. The only exception would be your typical beach stay, because obviously if you want to plan some days to relax at the beach, you're better off doing that after your safari and just before returning home. So let me start by summarizing some non-beach destinations. Let's start with the most obvious destination of all, which is Cape Town. Now, I'd rather use the term Cape Region because obviously there's more to see than the city itself. First of all, in a nutshell, it is a rather westernized part of Africa. You will not feel as if you are in Africa, really. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That might also mean that Cape Town is like the best place to start your first Africa visit if you've never visited the continent before. And if you come to Cape Town, please be aware that there's so many things to see and do that you can at least fill 4 to 5 days with day trips here. And then you will only have seen like the absolute highlights. So don't make the mistake of staying too short. You will need at least 5 or 6 nights, so 4 or 5 full days to cover the whole area of Cape Town and everything in its surroundings. If I may just give you a little list of day trips that are certainly worth it in my point of view. One day I would certainly visit the center of Cape Town, and then more precisely I would visit the Victoria and Alfred Waterfront here, which is a very nice pleasure harbor with lots of little shops and restaurants around. Very nice place to be. There's also the aquarium there, and you can do day trips from here to Robben Island. So this is where Nelson Mandela's prison was. Very, very, very worth it. That's a full day at least. Another day, even if you're taking it slow and you only want to do one thing, but with being a little bit active, then it's certainly, the hike up Table Mountain. You can go there with the cart, the cable cart, but there might be huge crowds, and you might actually take a long time before you get on board and on top of Table Mountain. So it's actually better to hike there if you're a little bit sporty. Then again, this is a little tip to you, my little tip to you. You know, seeing Table Mountain is not the nicest while you're standing on it. So if you really want a view over the city that does not only show you the city, but Table Mountain as well, then basically you're better off going to Lion's Head. It's an easier hike, it's a fun hike as well, less crowding, much less people there. But once you make it to the top, you've got an awesome view over the city, as well as Table Mountain, as well as Robben Island in the north, as well as Camps Bay and all that here on the west coast. So it's a very, very beautiful place to see the whole city from. Now, a third day trip is certainly seeing the Cape Point. So that's the south here, it's Cape Point. That is a day trip that you certainly would have to start by going out of the city, and then right here, underneath the mountain here, is Kirstenbosch Botanical Gardens, which is certainly worth a visit in our summertime, because you've got lots of protea flowers then and an amazing amount of sunbirds and all that. Very beautiful. Making your way south then, you'll come to the coast, and one of the first stops you'll make for sure is the Boulders Beach penguin colony. Very nice to visit. And in the end, you will end up here at the Cape Point, which is actually a nature reserve. There's lots of nice walks, nice hikes to be done there along the beach, along the rocky coast. You can go up to the Cape Point lighthouse and all that. When you had your lunch, because there's nice places to picnic there as well as a restaurant and all that. When you had your lunch in the afternoon, it's time to head back to Cape Town, but I would certainly do that via the nice scenic drive on the west side of the Cape Point, and then you'll pass by amazing, nice little bays and very photogenic little towns like Hout Bay and Camps Bay again, which are also, by the way, nice places to stay, and also there's many nice restaurants there, so you don't even need to hurry back to wherever you're staying. You could actually grab your dinner on the way home. So that is certainly another full day. That would be 3 days already. A fourth day is the wine region. Hey? If you're not into wines that much and you keep it down to 1 day, then I would say do it from Cape Town. No need to get accommodation specifically for the wine region. So just make a day tour out of it, and maybe first visit Stellenbosch. You might go further on to Franschhoek, even to Parel. It is a very nice area. I would say do your research and find the wine houses that you think are the best for you, or get in touch with one of the many tour operators from Cape Town that provide tours to certain wine houses, including lunch and all that, and chances to taste wines. There's a few wine tastings, at least one in the morning and a few in the afternoon before heading back to Cape Town. Or, again, maybe ask me, because I have my contacts as well, and I can hook you up with the right people that deliver such wine tasting tours. If you're obviously really into wines, you might actually stay a couple of days there. Another trip again is a little bit further off. That is here to Hermanus. Now Hermanus is more or less the capital, I'd say, of all the activities that happen on the ocean, on the water. So if you want to do a whale watching tour from the boat, not from the rocky coastline, because you could do that as well, but if you want to do it from the boat, then Hermanus is your departure point. The same thing with our famous white shark cage diving. So that also happens from Hermanus as a base. So that is certainly another day trip, I'd say, that you can take from Cape Town. If you go there either in the morning or in the afternoon, perhaps better even in the afternoon after having been on the ocean, drive back along the scenic route that takes you through Pringle Bay, which is here, and then further on. This is a really, really beautiful coastline, and you'll see the sunset behind the Cape Point here. a very awesome scenery as you drive back to Cape Town. The only place that isn't worth visiting, obviously, is the Cape Flats, which is the majority of the city. It's not very attractive, lots of people there, but nothing that a tourist would like. So from there on, if you're back here on the main road in Strand, you just drive the main highway, so to speak, back to Cape Town. So, but as you can see, that's already 5 days that I've filled now with day trips, and I haven't touched on any of the local markets. Or you can take courses there to get into lots of different things. But one thing that pops out obviously is cuisine. So we've got a good mixture in Cape Town of lots of different cultures and whatever these people eat. So that gives us a cuisine that's a fusion of Indian and African and European, and all that makes for some very, very interesting dishes. And you can learn how to handle all these different ingredients with cooking courses. So that's another thing that lots of people like to do in Cape Town. I haven't even mentioned that, but there's a zillion other stuff even. So just make sure that you take your time in Cape Town, and that you fill your days with the things that you want to do, that really interest you. And the best thing, obviously, is to discuss all those things with your travel agent. Now, when it comes to accommodation in Cape Town, there's lots of little places that you can actually stay. I would actually say that the high-rise hotels outside the Victoria and Alfred waterfront are the best option to stay. Don't forget, Cape Town can actually be really crowded, especially on the roads as well. So you need to get somewhere, right? I would say try for some smaller local bed and breakfast, or a lodge. And there's so many choices, if you want to fork out a little bit more money, the best and the most exclusive and the nicest looking is actually, not only from the lodge viewpoint, but also from the view that you have from your lodge, is the posh little bays on the west side. So I just mentioned them. So Camps Bay would be like my top pick, Hout Bay and so on. Chapman's Peak even a little bit lower. There's lots of nice little hotels there, or lodges or bed and breakfasts, from very expensive to still affordable. Now, if you say, listen, I'm not gonna really invest much money in that, and I want to stay away from those places because they are a little bit more expensive on average because of their location. Well, there's other places as well. This side of the mountain, they don't have a view over the sea, but okay, you've got a mountain view then, but there's some nice places to be had there. And one of my places that I actually like a lot is Blaubergstrand, which is here. There's nice places here on Blaubergstrand that offer you a stay that is, let's say, very affordable, but also you've got an awesome view over the city with the Table Mountain in the background. And you can see Robben Island from there as well. So Blaubergstrand is certainly a place to stay as well. The only downside being that to get anywhere, it's going to take a little bit more of driving, but it's more affordable on average. Now, there is other places where you can stay further away, Stellenbosch and all that. But again, I would only choose those if you want to stay over there multiple days. To me, it doesn't really make sense that you have to pack your suitcases, move to another lodge, check in again, and then after a few days, pack your suitcase again, check out, check in somewhere else. It's a waste of time, especially because there's so many things to do in Cape Town. So I only use these places if people want to stay multiple nights, because they filled multiple day activities in the region outside of Cape Town. In Cape Town, if you're with a big group of people, actually even if you're with a couple, there is one little other option still, which is, as you can see here in the harbor, you can see all these hotels, apartments around it. They're not really high-rise hotels, like 3 or 4 stories mostly. These are very luxurious hotel complexes and apartment complexes. And these apartments are rented out a lot short term. So if you're really like into self-catering and you want to do your own tours, not organized, you get a rental car and all that, these might also be a good place that to choose, as a base to explore the whole area from. As they get even more interesting, the more you are with more people. If you're with two couples or a big family, or even three couples and all that, there's apartments with 1 bedroom, 2 and 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, even all with their separate bathrooms. So they're really a nice deal the bigger your party gets. So that's another thing you can go for. So these Law Hill waterfront apartments and so on. There's a couple because I haven't noted them all. They are very nicely located as well, because also on foot you can actually get to the Victoria and Alfred waterfront. You don't even need to take your car. So that's really nice to get to all the restaurants in the evening and so on. And then lastly, now that we've had what there is to do and where you have to stay, where you can stay, one last thing I need to mention is, well, how do you connect this with the Kruger region? Well, that's very easy. You see, the airport isn't far away. There's the airport, and it has daily regular flights to both Nelspruit and Hoedspruit. Like there's 2 flights to Hoedspruit, I think. There's even more to Nelspruit. So Kruger and Cape Town are very well connected. Okay, so next up, the garden route. It's very logical that I speak about that next, because it's, so to speak, right next door to Cape Town. Now, the garden route is the coastal route that's all the way from Cape Town, past George, to Port Elizabeth here. And there's plenty of things to see and do. It's a very beautiful region, and you can actually spend almost a week there. Do you need to? No, you can pick out a couple of things as well. It really depends on what else you have in mind of doing during your visit in South Africa, and obviously it also depends on the amount of time you have and on the budget that you've foreseen for your trip. Now, on the garden route, in a nutshell, it is one of the most scenic routes in South Africa, and obviously it is still very westernized, I'd say. So just like Cape Town, it's a good place to start your first Africa trip if you've never had the continent before. Again, though, to see at least the most interesting things on that garden route, you will need 4 to 5 nights, 3 to 4 full days. That is because there's so much things to see and do there, and if I just may summarize some of them. So going out of Cape Town, first of all, you have Swellendam, which is an old Dutch town that's very well preserved with some nice scenery, some nice buildings, some beautiful museums as well. So that's certainly worth a stop while driving further towards the east. In Mosselbay, there is the Bartolomeo Diaz Museum. So he's the first one to round the Cape. And there's a replica of his boat in the museum. You can actually go on the boat, so it's quite awesome. But from Mosselbay, you could also go further away from the coast to Oudtshoorn, for example. Oudtshoorn, another nice little Dutch old town. You can do a visit to an ostrich farm there. There's the Kango Caves there. Further away from Oudtshoorn is the Swartberg Pass, which is a very beautiful road to drive. So it's a passageway through the mountains. That's also certainly worth a day trip from Mosselbay and back, for example. But you see, now I've already discussed two days now, and we're nowhere yet. And I've already skipped a little bit here because I assume maybe you've done Hermanus already while you're in Cape Town. So moving on further, I wouldn't stay at George, it's a bit too big, but further on, there's beautiful bays. My preference obviously would be Knysna, very well known. And certainly Featherbed Island, so that's the little, there's no real island because it's connected but with the mainland. But it's a very green area where you can go across with a ferry and then do a beautiful hike there while you're overlooking the coastline as well as the whole of Knysna. Anyway, it's just a beautiful area. There's accommodation in town as well as on this side of the coast, so overlooking the rocky coast, as well as further away from Knysna, in the green forests and all that, which are actually also nice places to stay. So it really depends on what you want, what your budget is, and all that. But that goes for the whole, not just for Knysna, but for any stop you will make, you want to make along the garden route. One of my other favorite places to stay is right here, Nature's Valley. This is a little bit of a hidden gem for me. This valley, this beach is absolutely unspoiled. This town is absolutely small. I think there's only a couple of bed and breakfasts there. Tranquility Lodge, which doesn't allow kids, and then another little bed and breakfast that does. There's maybe 2 or 3 more. I don't really keep an eye on them constantly, but there's not that many. Like most people, that need to stay outside. The point is, Nature's Valley is really unspoiled, and from there you can do awesome hikes to the east as well as to the west of the coastline. Along that coastline, it's very rocky, very beautiful, very green as well. Not a lot of people at all, so it's an absolute beautiful area to get away from people and to even like maybe fill 2 days and relax. Depends on what you want, obviously. But this would be one of my favorites along that garden route. So as you can see, there's plenty of things to do. I have by far not named them all, but yeah, that's a typical thing that people also like to include when they come to South Africa and when they want to visit South Africa, as well as like this coastline around Cape Town as well as Kruger. I would say accommodation-wise, there's plenty of choices, but please make sure that you only stick to 1 or 2 or maximum, depending on your stay obviously, maximum 3 lodges to use as a base to do day trips from. Don't make the mistake, make the error of checking out and in of lodges constantly and planning your day around that instead of planning your day around visiting things that are worth visiting. To get to Kruger, that's something else, obviously, because now you're in the middle of nowhere, so to speak. So you see, all the things on the garden route that I basically spoke of are concentrated around the middle of the garden route. Cape Town, this side, being as far away as Port Elizabeth. These are your 2 main airports. Now, the garden route is typically something you do as a self-drive. You could do it with a guide as well, but that would cost you because obviously you have to employ that guide and he has to stay with you, so you need accommodation for the guide as well. It's better to do it in self-drive. And if you do it in self-drive, you basically have a couple of options when you combine it with Kruger. You could say, well, I'll start in Cape Town and then I'll drive to the garden route. And in the end, I'll drive early morning to Port Elizabeth, take an airplane, and from there to Kruger. Well, that's a good idea, but you have to be aware that there is no direct flights from Port Elizabeth to Kruger area. So you will first need to fly to Joburg and have a layover there, and then from there on fly on to Kruger, which means, since all flights to Kruger are over noon, that your flight from Port Elizabeth to Johannesburg would have to be early morning, which means that your departure from your last stay here on the garden route would be even more early morning as to get in time to Port Elizabeth for your flight. Another idea you might have is say, okay, I will not drive the whole way to Port Elizabeth. I will do the garden route or part of it in self-drive, but I'll make sure that my last night on the garden route is a place not too far from Cape Town, so that it's not too far of a drive heading back to Cape Town. That would simplify things in the sense that you still have to get an early departure from your last lodge somewhere. You'll still have to catch your flight in time, but it is a direct flight to the Kruger area. So these are over noon, so that it'll give you a little bit more time to catch your flight, to hand in your car and to catch your flight. A last possibility, obviously, is that you don't start from Cape Town. You could also say, well, if I start my trip, I'm not going to start in Cape Town, I'm going to start in Port Elizabeth. So then you would arrive in Joburg, you would take a local flight to Port Elizabeth, get your car there, get on the road, and then do the Garden Route first from east to west, and on the last day end up in Cape Town and fly to Kruger. So that's another possibility. Okay, so our next region that I would like to discuss, a good region to combine with Kruger, is the Panorama Route. Now, where's the Panorama Route? Well, that might be the first big advantage. You see, if you're only thinking of doing one scenic route in South Africa, you might actually want to prefer the Panorama Route as opposed to the Garden Route that I just discussed here. Why? Well, because the Garden Route is a little bit more difficult to combine than the Panorama Route. Because where is the Panorama Route actually? And this is a serious advantage. It is right here next to Kruger. Now, what is the Panorama Route? Well, it's a mountainous route that has lots of attractions, and you can do that route in 1 or 2 days. Now, this might be another advantage as opposed to the Garden Route. The Garden Route is a lot of driving. It is beautiful, but it's not really that special, I'd say, in the sense that you might find equally scenic routes in other countries and other destinations. While as the Panorama Route, to be honest, to top that would be a little bit difficult. At least one attraction on there, which is the Bladder Canyon, which is the 4th biggest canyon in the world and the biggest green canyon in the world. Yeah, that view is hard to top. So yeah, doing it in 1 or 2 days is awesome. But as I said, the most awesome thing about the Panorama Route is that it's just right next to Kruger. So that'll save you a lot in local flights and local transfers or whatever. You don't need to get on an extra flight to get to the Panorama and then to Kruger or something like that. You could actually even combine both while not moving lodges. So let me first go over the attractions that are on there. That'll explain a lot, I think. Let's start with the absolute must-sees, maybe. The Bladder Canyon, which is right, this is the Panorama, by the way, but the Bladder Canyon, which is here with the viewpoint on the 3 rondavels, and you cannot really make them out from the the map right now, but the rondavels are here, 1, 2, 3. That is one of the most beautiful spots in Africa, in South Africa. So that is certainly a must-see. Then you've got Borklok's potholes, where 2 little rivers called the Bladder River and the Tre River join, and they've cut themselves out deep into the bedrock, and it's a beautiful area to be as well. I would say at least stitch 1 viewpoint over the low veld in there. So from high veld to low veld is a difference of 1,000 meters more or less in altitude. So you need to put at least 1 viewpoint over the low veld on your little trip, on your day trip. I often choose God's Window because it's very scenic, and because as you get to the top, it's a bit of rainforest on the top because there's lots of clouds hitting that mountainous wall, and that's a bit special. It's a bit strange for Africa. So those are certainly a few must-sees. Then there are obviously a lot of nice other things to do, like, they're not absolutely must-sees, but it depends on your interests, We were at God's Window, not too far from there. It's Restcamp Gorge, which is this one here. It's got an elevator, a glass elevator going down into the gorge, and then they've made a walkway, it's an hour tour or something, a wooden walkway. Again, in like very lush and forest that has aspects of a tropical forest. It is an absolute beautiful thing to see, but in the right season. So you have to come in the summertime. There's lots of insects and butterflies and all that. It's very much alive in the summertime. As I said, it depends on your interest, because further away from Restcamp, you can also go to Pilgrim's Rest. So if you're not only a nature enthusiast, but you also like to have a little bit of culture in your day tours, then Pilgrim's Rest is certainly something you might consider. It is an old mining town. There were lots of gold mines there, and it's very, very well preserved. So it's from the 1900s, 1902. So the hotel, as well as the bar, as well as the gas station, all that's very well preserved, very nice to walk through. There's little museums there as well and stuff. So it really depends on what you want to get out of your trip. Optional things to do, as you probably seen from my map already, there's plenty of falls along the way as well. Now that depends really on your interest. You see, South Africa is a rather dry country, so for the local travelers, local people traveling to the Panorama Route, they obviously stitch those all those falls in because they're not used to seeing lots of falls in their rather dry country. And they even do it in the winter time, and this region gets most of its rain in the summertime. So in the wintertime, it's very dry, so those waterfalls are rather a trickle, but still they come to visit them. For international tourists, it really depends on what country they come from. If you're coming from a country that's full of waterfalls, then our waterfalls are going to look like a shower. So then I would not really spend much time with them. Or maybe choose one, but then choose one that not only allows a viewpoint from the parking lot, so to speak, but rather one that has a hike to get to it, like Bridal Veil Falls and Lone Creek Falls. It's nice little hikes to the waterfall and back in a green environment, and that is certainly worth more than just seeing a trickle of a waterfall from a parking lot. So waterfalls are one of those optional things you can stitch on. Further away even are a nice little town called Sabi, which is worth a little visit, but then especially the Long Tom Pass, which is this side. Long Tom Pass is a very scenic route as well. There's also the Long Tom Cannon there, a cannon that was used in the wars between the Boers and the English. So that's mounted there somewhere as well. So this is the bottom part of the Panorama Route. And if you're into scenery, but also into little aspects of culture and history, then this little route is also worth it. That'll take you a second day though, because you can easily do, let's say, the Panorama Route from Abel Erasmus Pass all the way to Graskop and back down the mountain or back to your hotel. But if you want to do this other part, then you will certainly need a second day. So that's the Panorama Route right next to Kruger. Now, when it comes to accommodation, and I think you might have seen from my map already, there's so many options. If you really want to stay on the mountains, you can actually go further west, and there's awesome estates and little, how can I say, valleys hidden away. Like, for example, one I sometimes choose right here. It's for Lorenkloof. It's really a nice place to just relax for a couple of days and go on hikes in the mountains. But if you want to really stay closer to the center of it, there's lots of accommodations, very green accommodations on the mountains, on the Panorama Route, not necessarily in town, but you might have lots of bed and breakfast in the little towns of Sabi and in the little town of Graskop, but also like lodges further away on very green estates. Now, if you choose those, then please be aware that you choose those while only doing the Panorama Route. There's nothing else to do there, but visiting the Panorama Route and maybe little activities like that, go horse riding or something like that. It's not a place to discover the Kruger from. The Kruger's too far away from there. Also be aware that in our winter time on the mountain it gets rather chilly. But then you might also choose accommodation down the mountain and then just choose that accommodation to get into the Kruger Park as well as to go to the Panorama Route. Now, as you can see here, this area around Hazy Blue is very popular and got lots of lodges. You see this? Lots of bed and breakfast as well. So lots of people do this. They stay down the mountain going to Kruger from there, because Paul Kruger Gate is here somewhere. It's underneath Sabi Sand. Here is a Paul Kruger Gate, but there's also a gate here somewhere, Mindy Gate. Now, keeping in mind, I hope you saw all my other videos, but keeping in mind that you're then in the south section, which is rather busy, and also keeping in mind that This area, when it comes to local people, is also very busy. These are very busy communities. Hazyview is not a very quiet town, to say the least. Another option you have, if you want to stay away from this busy section, is to actually go more north and choose Orpengate, which is right here as your entry base for Kruger, and then Abel Erasmus Pass as your entry to the Panorama Route. So there's lots of lodges here on the low veld as well to do the Panorama Route from, as well as to do Kruger from. It'll be much more quiet, you'll be more in nature, you'll be more away from people, and as an extra, I'd say, there's nice little daytime activities you can do here as well, things that I don't think are all possible anywhere else on the low veld, certainly not around Hazyview. Like for example, here we've got the famous Jessica the Hippo, which is somewhere here on the Bladder River. You can visit Kinyonga Reptile Center, where they've got lots of snakes, and you can even do a little snake handling course. There is an entrance point to the canyon, but from below. So you can actually, instead of doing the panorama route, you can actually get into, like here, you see, you can get into the canyon like this, and you can do a boat trip on the lake, on the Bladder Dam. And then you also have Moholo Holo, which is a animal rescue center, a rehabilitation center for animals that got into trouble as they got out of Kruger typically, which is also worth a visit. So you get lots of other things that you can do from here. So if you want to combine the panorama as well as Kruger Park, that is, right? So the Kruger National Park, then one of these lodges on the low veld here, not too far from Hoedspruit, might also be a very good location. Again, Hoedspruit Eastgate Airport being close is also obviously an advantage of choosing a lodge here. Yeah, so that's when it comes to accommodation, and when it comes to combining with Kruger. Now, when it comes to combining the Panorama Route with Kruger, please note that you can do both in self-drive mode, but you can also have both with organized tours. So most lodges, if not all lodges, can provide day tours going on the mountain, as well as day tours going to Kruger National Park. Okay, time now for some other regions that you typically can combine with Kruger, but after your safari. So now let me give you some ideas of some beach stays that are very good combinations with Kruger. The first one would be the beach in South Africa. If you go down, you can see that south of Kruger is Swaziland, with next door Mozambique, and then you get to the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and right here is Richards Bay Airport. So this is the typical area here that has nice beaches. As you can see, Durban, the big city of Durban, is even further away. So if you want to do the coastline here, then it does make sense that you do this in our summertime, and maybe less so in our wintertime. Don't forget, South Africa is rather south on the planet, so we do get winters that are a little bit chilly. I wouldn't say cold, it never snows, but if you're at the beach and you can't really enjoy the beach, then what is the purpose anyway? So, but it is a very nice area. Now, as I switched on everything here, a lot of reserves came on as well. I just put them on because I wanted to be complete. There's lots of private reserves here, as well as some national reserves. Thinking of Shoesloe Umfolozi as a national reserve, where you can do more game drives and this and that. I switched them on for completion, but I would not suggest doing them if you've already done Kruger. They've got nothing more to add. I would rather than focus on really the beach side of things, Now it is a bit of a protected area as well. And from your beach stay, and let's say, for example, you took St. Lucia, which is a small little town here, and you took a bed and breakfast there, you can still do the beach, but you could also book trips on the estuary behind it, and then go looking for crocodiles and hippo and lots of bird life. It's quite awesome to do. But when it comes to safari days, yeah, you can stitch them in if you want, but that's not really what you're there for if you've already done Kruger, right? So, but there's plenty of options, and certainly in our summertime, it is maybe the one of the most affordable options, I'd say, if you want to do a beach stay. If you're really thinking of doing both the beach and more reserves, then I would say take one of these lodges that are not on these private reserves themselves, but just out of those reserves, and then do day tours from there, also possible. But depending on your budget also, you can go for bed and breakfast in St. Lucia, as I discussed, but please be aware that more up north and more exclusive and more hidden away are some very, very beautiful lodges that are very private, but a little bit more upmarket, a little bit higher budget than obviously the average bed and breakfast in St. Lucia. So you can choose those as well. So lots of options, very nice beach that we have, not too far from Kruger. But how to get there, that's the thing. And well, there's a couple of things you could do. You could say, well, I'm self-driving. If you're self-driving, then it would make sense to, as your last accommodation in Kruger, to stay at the south end of Kruger before you do that drive all the way down. Because otherwise it's going to be a really long drive, and you maybe not get there before the sun sets and all that, which isn't very nice to be driving anyway after dark. So make sure that the trip from the Kruger to the coast, you can do that in the daytime hours, I'd say. So that's why I would choose a departure location on the south end of Kruger if I were to do that. What you could also do, obviously, is not rush at all and take some place in Swaziland and stay overnight there. Swaziland is its own nice little country. It doesn't really have much going for it compared to South Africa, but that doesn't mean that you cannot find some rather nice places in rather little, in small reserves, in pure nature, nice to relax before you get to your beach. So that's when it comes to self-driving. But you can also fly. There is a daily flight from Nelspruit to Durban. But as I said, Durban is rather far away from where you really need to be. So that's going to cost you a transfer. That's a long transfer. It's going to cost you. Or you might say, okay, I start driving again myself. I rent a car in Durban and go up and then down. That's also a lot of driving then. Maybe not ideal to have that flight from Nelspruit to Durban. The better airport we get to is Richards Bay. Unfortunately, there's no direct flights from anywhere in the Kruger to Richards Bay. So you're always going to have to fly back to Johannesburg and from there fly on to Richards Bay if you want to fly there. But at least then you're closer to where you need to be, and you can actually choose to be driven there, just be transferred there, without having to rent your own car and stuff like that. So yeah, that is the coastline in South Africa. That isn't obviously the only choice we have as when it comes to beaches. You might also choose the beach in Mozambique. Now, compared to South Africa's beach, the beach in Mozambique is a bit more exclusive and a bit more upmarket, I'd say. What is there to be had? It's not that far, and one typical destination is Vilankulos. So there is an airport there. And from Vilankulos, you can get to lots of beach hotels and lodges that are on this coastline. The closer they are to town, the cheaper they are. The further away they are from town, the more expensive they get and the more exclusive they get. Especially the islands of Benguela and Bazaruto have lots of little lodges or even bigger lodges that are very, very upmarket with very high prices. But yeah, lots of choices there. People that are self-driving, typically South Africans, then I mean, that are self-driving from South Africa all the way to here. They stay around the towns in the cheaper hotels and bed and breakfast and stuff, and take care of their own food. International tourists typically fly in and take a lodge that is a bit more further away from that busy center here. My preferences are actually just, I just calculate the cost of a transfer in, like it is a cost that transfer, but at least then you get further away from town. So there's nice little places I choose right here, for example, in this area. It is, let's say, it's as beautiful nature-wise as the islands and away from the crowds, but it's less expensive. So that's why I choose areas like this, up north or to the south. Now you can see it's a rather far drive, but one of my favorites is Sava Dunes, which is started by friends of ours, and that's very, very far away from people, I'd say, but it is worth that long transfer, and it is an awesome location for a very good average price per night. So that's one of my favorites. But those are the things that you can get in Mozambique. It's much more upmarket, I'd say, on average, and it is a bit more tropical. White, beachy, white sands from coral reefs and stuff on the beach, as opposed to yellow sand. And temperatures are higher. Even in our winter time, I'm still quite confident of sending people there to the coast, rather than sending them in the winter time further south to our own coast in South Africa. So in the winter time, the Mozambican coastline is certainly the better choice. But even in the summertime, I would still prefer the coastline of Mozambique because it's much more quiet. Now, how to get there? That's the last thing. This is one of the cool things, actually. There is daily flights from Nelspruit to Vilanculos, and from Vilanculos to Johannesburg. That actually means that you can do a trio of flights: Johannesburg-Kruger, Johannesburg-Poof to Hoedspruit, for example. Do your thing here, visit the Panorama Route, do the Kruger Park, visit the private reserves and stuff, fly on for a beach holiday to Mozambique, and then fly straight back out to Johannesburg and catch your international flight home. Very easy. So that is one of the other advantages of the coastline of Mozambique. Right, so that concludes all the regions that I wanted to point out in combination with Kruger. There's more to be had, but maybe those are less important. I'll touch on those in the next video, because my next video might be the most important one, as I'm planning on giving you all my tips and tricks as to, assemble the most awesome Kruger trip based on everyone's length of stay and budget. And so I'll hope to see you guys in the next video.